Great. Welcome back to House Healthcare. We have Representative Lalone with us, who is the chair of Judiciary. So we were having a conversation around Representative Donahue's second amendment of removing family or household. And there was a question about how calling 911 works versus extreme risk protection orders. 911, what we're trying to do with extreme risk protection orders is get it to the point, like we stop something from happening versus waiting till there is an actual emergency happening in the moment. So from that, there were some questions on how long an extreme risk protection order takes to move through the process. So can you just remind us again, if you can, and if not, get Ledge Counsel of the basic process?
I did email Eric Patrick, legislative counsel, who I know is available at 11.
Okay, that's fine.
And I'm happy to explain it, but why not get it from nonpartisan? Not that I would be partisan in my explanation of it. It's facts are facts.
Okay.
But I would just suggest have the expert.
Okay. And I just always think of you as the expert on everything. So I feel
pretty comfortable, confident on it. I could explain it, and then Eric can explain, and you can see how wrong or right it was.
A little test.
Rather than taking that chance.
Okay. Perfect.
Maybe I can fill you in on a couple of the other things as far as that.
Okay. Sure.
But I can start with kind of where we came from, where we ended up with the IRPA one.
That's great.
Then you can get that further explanation. So I think, and I'll just cut right to the chase. There were two main issues that I think convinced the 8 of us to find the amendment unfavorable. One is the staffing shortage we have in law enforcement right now. And there are parts of Vermont that you can't get fast, or even actually in very populated parts of Vermont as well, that you can't get to law enforcement in a reasonable time. It'd be quicker to go to court. So that was probably the primary. The second was written testimony that we received this morning from the Department of State's attorney. It's on our webpage if people want to look at it, read the whole thing, but I'll just read the critical line for me, which is ultimately a statutory provision authorizing direct filing by law enforcement would not significantly change the existing system, and generally law enforcement would be likely to involve a state's attorney in the process given our on-call system. Now, state's attorneys are always available for bail hearings or lodgings, arrests. They're available to law enforcement, and law enforcement wouldn't just go to court in a very unique circumstance. So those were the two main reasons that came out and for why we had our vote.
Okay.
From our discussion.
So go ahead. So and just so you know, if Martin can't answer, we'll have Ledge Counsel.
Okay. So I guess if it is an emergency call and they get the court order, who goes to the residence?
It is going to have to be law enforcement. They're going to have to be.
Okay.
Absolutely.
No, it would be the same people who's going to call with 911.
Well, presumably when the court and state's attorney are contacted, they know how to get law enforcement out to places perhaps more quickly. I don't know.
Okay.
So it's
another option for a family member to go straight, and then the process begins.
Right.
Okay. All right. So go ahead.
But just so I understand, IRPA, because I really am on the periphery of understanding what it is. I get the acronym and what it stands for, but so let's go to the real world here. A family member is in a house. There is no gun, but there's a person repeatedly talking about taking his own life, his or her own life. So if that family member wants to prevent that person from owning a firearm, what does that person do?
Presently, they could call law enforcement, who would get state's attorneys involved, or they could directly call state's attorney.
But if the bill is in force, what would they do? Is it different?
They could still go to law enforcement or state's attorney. And as I said in my this report yesterday, That's often could be the preferred approach, given the expertise of the state's attorneys in these cases. But there may be instances where it's critical that the family can go directly to court. So they would have to file an affidavit. And now you are starting to test me, but that's okay. I don't mind. I have.
Well, I mean, you don't have to go into great detail.
Well, I can, but I think it's important to understand this part. So if I can go right to the heart. So the petitioner, this is for an emergency, and that's where the family member would most likely go, because then the state's attorney would be substituted. Petitioner shall submit an affidavit in support of the motion alleging that the respondent poses an imminent and extreme risk of causing harm to himself or herself or another person by purchasing, possessing, or receiving a dangerous weapon, or by having a dangerous weapon within the respondent's custody or control. The affidavit shall state the specific facts supporting the allegations in the motion, including the imminent danger posed by the respondent and any dangerous weapons the petitioner believes to be in the respondent's possession, custody, or control. And so that's what has to be provided. There elsewhere, and I'll look on online, there probably is already a form affidavit for getting an ERPO that one could print off, but I will have to double check that.
So if we go with the language like it is and pass the bill, then the family member of, Joe Smith will be able to say, Joe Smith's a danger, I feel, and they're going to take that information and create, and I assume go to Mr. Smith and say you can't buy a firearm or something like that. What I'm trying to understand is today, what would, without the bill in place, what would be the procedure? Is it different? Can he still go and get this done without language in the bill?
There are extra steps. They would have to go to law enforcement and state's attorney.
Okay.
And if I just find there's one other part that's important that I missed, that the court, it says an extreme risk of harm to others may be shown by establishing that the respondent has inflicted or attempted to inflict bodily harm on another, or by his or her threats or actions, the respondent has placed others in reasonable fear of physical harm or themselves, or by his or her actions or inactions, the respondent has presented a danger to persons in his or her care. So and the facts, the courts will look and they have to have the specific facts. It can't just be high level, this person is a danger, and I want you to take away their guns. The court, we don't have that much experience yet on ERPOs, but it's a similar process to relief from abuse orders. And many relief from abuse orders are filed, and many are not granted because the affidavit hasn't been sufficient. And go ahead.
So it's fair to say then that this, putting the language in the bill, not the amendment, it's not the amendment, but the language in the bill just cuts out the law enforcement piece of it and allows the person to go directly into the system to get it.
It doesn't cut the law enforcement piece. The law enforcement can still be involved.
But they don't have to be.
They don't have to be under the bill as we passed yesterday.
That's what I mean.
Correct.
Okay.
That's correct. They do not have to be.
So it cuts that piece out. It makes it potentially easier to do.
That it's, yes, the access to get the whole process done is easier. That is the idea.
Okay.
Right, so does that answer, do you have a question?
Yeah, a little bit.
Especially the new person.
I'm just wondering if you took testimony on, I'm thinking about all these situations in the news, hesitancy on families to actually reach out to police because of pre-existing interactions or perceived response.
Yes, and that was one of the things we discussed today as well, but we also had testimony from the state's attorneys, Department of State's attorneys to that effect. There may have been other people who testified to that. Frankly, I mean, we should be very straight on this, that if somebody gets an ERPO issued, law enforcement is necessarily involved. They have to issue, service, provide service of the order, they have to deal with relinquishment, so, and that should be understood. It's not like the law enforcement and state's attorney are avoided in its entirety, but just to start the process. I think there isn't even a reluctance to start. Well, that's where the reluctance is. Starting the process going along.
Can you explain after the ERPO order is given and all of a sudden they became a danger, what the rest of the process is as far as time? And if they take, do they take any type of weapon, knives, or just the guns, or where do they go and when do they get them back?
So it would depend on the facts in the affidavit as far as identifying firearms, identifying weapons. Initially, as I understand it from testimony, actually last time when we took this up, because that process, this doesn't change in this bill at all. That process remains the same. But the process is that the order would be served. My understanding is that there would be an order on relinquishing those firearms, and there'll probably be some specifics such as providing them to law enforcement when law enforcement arrives, or taking them to a FFL. I mean, there's in the law itself, it doesn't have to be law enforcement. It can be an FFL that stores it, or it could be others that store it. There's discretion that the court could say, I'm fine with you taking them to this other house. We don't like that, is not the best way to do this, but in any event, so that's kind of the first step. And if there thereafter is any kind of indication that firearms or whatever the weapons are subject to that order have not been turned over, then law enforcement can seek a warrant to go and search and seize firearms. My understanding is in the 18 ERPOs that were released or that were issued last year, that it was all pretty smooth. And I don't think they had to do anything like that, was my understanding, but that's kind of the process.
The reason I ask that is I know of a person that happened to, and after months and months and months of no infraction, he was proven okay, to get the weapons back, it was a huge sum of money because of storage. So who would be liable for that?
That I don't know the answer to that.
So I just wondered the whole process of that.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting question. I didn't know that there was storage charges. So.
Thank you. Do you have a question for Martin?
I'm not sure if it's for you, but it's about data. So we have, and this hasn't come up, but we talk a lot about, we've heard a lot about people needing to protect themselves from intruders. And I'm just wondering if there's any data out there in the world about how often that is needed.
There is. I couldn't immediately point to it. You could look certainly at, I know that some of our written testimony, I believe from Everytown, there's three items of written testimony that have links. Actually, one that is from Kendall Jacobson on our website, I'm pretty sure has a bit about that, if I'm recalling right, and he's nodding his head. So you could look at that, but I don't remember the stats off the top of my head.
I'd be curious if you could help me with that. Thank you.
I just want to make sure the questions are pertaining to ERPO.
Yeah, sorry.
So for ERPO, how long is it valid for? Like if someone is substantiated and they remove the gun, but let's say it's for mental health instability and the person recovers and goes through a lot of changes and it's like life is better. So how long does it take for, and what's the process of getting that revoked?
Sure. So the emergency ERPO can be in place for 14 days. There has to be a hearing within 14 days. I have heard that there has been an instance where they would ask for an additional bit of time, and that often is at the request of the respondent, the person subject to the ERPO, but it's within 14 days, there has to be the opportunity to be heard by that individual. Final ERPO can be issued for up to 6 months, and an individual during that time period can seek to have the ERPO ended. There may be one other issue as far as how often, I think there's a limit on how often a person can come back and seek to have the ERPO expire. But after 6 months, whoever sought it would be the state's attorney or attorney general, could seek an extension.
Okay,
And they would have to show that it continues.
continues to be a threat. Okay. But if they don't do that, then it stops at that point, at 6 months?
Correct.
Okay,
Expires.
Great, thank you. And I think you can let council know we don't need him.
It's kind of like a test. I think I did okay.
You did great. Yeah,
I think you would answer the.
We'll have you come in.
Kendall's coming checking me.
Right.
A career path for you.
right.
So I have a nice sweetie question for this test.
A what?
Okay.
Nice sweetie question.
On ERPO?
Yes.
Okay. And Martin, if you can't,
Yeah, oh, yeah, no, I'm always happy to
Okay.
say I don't know, like I just said about the surcharges, so.
Appreciate that.
So when the ERPO's expiring, is the person who filed it notified of the expiration date?
That's a good question. I don't know off the top of my head. I would be surprised if they were not, but I don't know for sure. And we have a lot of stuff about, well, it's not really the same as it's not the same as victim notification, but
That's why I was thinking.
here's somebody who can answer the question.
Oh, I bet
I
I hear that, I got
Supposedly, I think I've answered most of their questions already. They're testing me, and I didn't want them to ask you the same questions to find out how wrong I was, but.
so we have one last question and then we're going to have to wrap up the discussion. So Daisy, you can ask the question you just asked Martin to Ledge Council if you'd like.
Eric, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, Eric
Keep going.
Fitzpatrick with the Office of Ledge Council, fortuitously timed my entrance, so.
Yes.
I have a question that might remind you of S3 from
Right,
2020. Victim notification. When an ERPA's expiring, is the person who filed it notified of the pending expiration date?
I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head. Whether there's anything specific in statute that requires victim notification in that instance. You're right, it is similar to the victim notification procedures that passed a couple of years ago in S3. Those did not apply to ERPO procedures though. Those were persons being released after they've been on orders on hospitalization for competency, standing evaluations, that sort of thing. Not ERPO, so, but I might be able to look it up and just poke it.
So I would say one thing is that,
Someone needs to mute. Maury, can you mute? Thank you.
so I know in section 4055E1 that to have the extension, there has to be an additional affidavit. Presumably the affidavit is something that would come from law enforcement or whoever initiates the ERPO process is usually the affiant, the person that does the affidavit, but that's a little bit different question. So, but if that's the case, but then again, that's not in the situation if the state's attorney just decides to let it expire. So that's a little bit different.
So I don't think we need that answer for this. I think that would be great if someone can get back to Daisy. So thank you very much. I think now we're going to do our last committee discussion and vote on all of them. You're welcome.
Need anything on the other two?
Oh, I guess tell us, yeah, we forgot. We haven't gotten that far. So yeah, tell us what you did on the other ones.
It'll be very quick.
Yes.
The first of the Representative Morgan, and we had a very nice discussion. Actually, there was actually a lot of agreement around the table that this is something that we want to be looking into as far as if somebody already owns a firearm or already owns a handgun, if we want to be that specific. And these are discussions we have to have. Then should they be subject to a 72-hour waiting period right now? We're exempting the fire or the gun shows to allow us more time to look at that. I have a bill request in for that, but there are too many questions unanswered. It would be easy to fake a sales receipt. That's not really sufficient. What documentation are we talking about? There's just a lot of issues that are unanswered here that we need to dig deeply into, and the Judiciary Committee is planning on doing that. So
your vote was?
So it was 8-0 unfavorable.
Okay, so I just want to be clear, we're not voting on this one.
No.
So this is not one that we're taking. So if you have a quick question, but then we need to move on.
ATF has your name on file, right? 24/7. Because I go to a federal firearms dealer to get this, it goes into the United
The NIC
States
system, yeah.
Sure, so you're on record. They have the record that I bought a gun 6 years ago. Or
No, I don't think they do
they
actually.
can throw them away.
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah, no, I'm almost positive about that, having dug deep into the NICS
Okay.
system a few
Yeah,
years ago.
thanks.
Yeah, so,
Okay, remember, we are not voting on this amendment, so I'm going to be clear. If you have questions, I would like you to take them offline because we need to move forward.
I didn't realize you were not voting on this.
We're not voting on this amendment.
To speak in English on it.
Okay,
You said
question on the vote.
820?
820 unfavorable.
Don't you have 11 committee members?
821.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was all.
Thank you.
And so your next amendment?
Also voted 821. We don't want to wait. I mean, we don't, the main crux of this was, hey, we'll know more about the constitutionality. Number one, we have strong testimony that it is constitutional from the Attorney General. I believe it's constitutional after looking deeply at this. And we're not going to know that much more in a year anyway. There's nothing really working in the Second Amendment that addressed Second Circuit of Vermont Court, which is binding on this court, which is likely to be decided in the next year anyway. So why not save lives in the interim? So that was 821 as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric, for coming.
Always a pleasure being up here.
Thank you.
All right, so we're going to go back to the first one and we're going to start doing some straw votes. We'll allow for a little bit of discussion. Sorry, Tuffer, you've missed discussion, but happy to have you weigh in. So the First Amendment is Rep. Donohue's amendment that would strike the entire H230 and have a report just on firearms deaths. We've had our discussion. Is there any other comments before we take a vote?
Can I make?
Absolutely.
I see, personally, I see no reason to not let this thing go forward. I want this constitutionality thing straightened out. And once that's done, if it's unconstitutional, that's the end of it. If it is constitutional, then it can go forward. This thing's been beat around for a long, long time. And that's my own personal feeling. I'm in favor of, I'm not in favor of the amendment.
Thank you.
Yes, I think we need to clarify our votes.
Yes, so I will do that. Yes. So I want to make sure Brian and Mari are on the screen for this one. Or in the room, just like magic.
As soon as I heard you were gonna go, I started coming back.
All right, so the first vote will be all those not in favor of this amendment. Raise your hand.
Okay, so if I'm not in favor,
Of the first.
So if you're not in favor of striking
it's a
this,
no vote.
yes.
Yeah, so that's the thing, it's a no.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Keep your hands up because I tend to not count well. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So, and then all those in favor, Mari, I'm going to have you put your hand down. Do you have a question?
No, that was a relic.
Okay. All those in favor of the amendment? 2. So when this is reported on the floor, it is 9-0 unfavorable. Okay, the next amendment we're voting on is Rep. Donohue's second amendment, which is striking out family or household member and inserting law enforcement officer. Any comments or discussions?
Since I wasn't here, but I did read all of this stuff.
Yes, you did.
I am in favor of this one. And because I'm thinking of how a person that's that's stressed out about this, I believe they're gonna call the police first. They're not gonna call the state's attorney or anybody else. That's, so I'm in favor of this.
Okay, Leslie?
So I'm not in favor of it for 2 reasons. The first is I live in a rural area. Law enforcement is very remote and not accessible frequently, which is a concern, which needs addressing in another world. And the second thing, it gives 2 pathways. So I think that allowing 2 pathways is better than having 1. So that's why.
Listen,
And I am not in favor of this, for the same reasons. I believe it gives two pathways. And I believe that many, many families and loved ones would be reticent to call in law enforcement to already volatile situations. And this provides a path for different people to have different mechanisms of doing this.
Brian? Oh, sorry, were you done?
Yeah.
Okay,
Is
Brian.
anyone else waiting?
I don't think
Okay,
so.
I'm just making sure. Yeah, I just think we need to give people more pathways to get their needs met besides having to go through the police, especially considering the unaddressed disparities that continue to be seen in policing, especially towards people living with mental conditions and people of color, BIPOC, so. And LGBTQ, people with disabilities still continue to see disparities and mistreatment. So I just think it's best to give families and loved ones many pathways to get to protect their families and loved ones besides using the police.
Alan?
Okay, so let me just try to get clarification first. Right now, if there is an abuse order and a family's having struggles, isn't this available now, court order?
We have an extreme risk protection order. This would expand it to allow family and household members to have a path,
Okay.
another path forward, rather than just calling law enforcement. Okay, anything else? All right, all those, again, not in favor of this amendment. I'm sorry.
Before we go.
Yeah,
Can't an individual right now call the Attorney General? They can do
That's what
that.
we were talking about.
that's what we were talking about.
That's what I was getting at.
It's an extra step.
Eric, thank you for coming back. Can you just clarify again? Who can call, like how the process works today and what the changes adding the family and household member? Thank you.
Well, the only person who can file the petition is the state's attorney or the attorney general. Sorry, Eric Fitzpatrick again.
Yes, thank you.
Council of West
And you can come up if you want, or stay right there.
Okay. So a petition can be filed by any party other than the state's attorney or the attorney general. It's true that a citizen could alert the state's attorney or the attorney general and say, here's the situation. I think that, you should go file a petition, or I request that you do. But that decision is ultimately in the hands of the SA or the AG, as opposed to the proposal, which permits the family or household member to file the petition themselves.
And the reason I said what I said is because I feel that an individual in our society today, rather than go straight, which they can if they want, to the Attorney General or to the state's attorney, this is another avenue for them by going to the police. The police know how to do all this like that. So
Okay.
that's how I feel.
Can I just clarify? But they can still, with this amendment, I mean, with what we have wrote the bill, they can still go to the police.
Yeah.
They can still go to the AG. They can still go to the state's attorney. This just adds one additional. It doesn't negate any of those other pathways. Is that correct?
Correct, yes.
It's increasing choices.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm also getting confused. The amendment would make it so that they would have to.
Right,
go
the
to
amendment
law
makes it,
enforcement,
right, the amendment says you have to go to law, if you're a family or household member, would go to law enforcement. So it,
Or state's attorney. They go to either one.
They're technically law enforcement, aren't they?
No.
Don't they like prosecute and?
so, okay, I'm gonna try and clarify this. And Eric, correct me if I'm wrong. If my husband feels that I'm in danger to myself or others, the way H230 is originally written, right? So we have the existing, I'm sorry.
You mean the way the law?
The law is originally written, right? So my husband has the option of going to law enforcement.
Could go chat with them, yeah.
Yes.
Tell them about it.
Could go tell them about it.
Right.
But I can't, my husband couldn't go and file their own petition.
Correct.
But then 230 as written would allow my husband to have that second avenue. The way it's written today.
Could file the petition,
Yes.
yes.
This amendment takes that option away.
The option of the husband filing the petition
Yes.
directly.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay. That help?
I also just want to make it clear that you could call law enforcement today.
Right.
And law enforcement could say, we're not going to do anything.
Or we have no one to come to the house. I mean, there's.
Or
We don't have funding or capacity to do
Or
that.
we don't think that it is of import. And so it would never even get to the court to be able to make a decision on it. But with this, you would be able to directly go to the court and say, and file a petition as a direct means of presenting why you think so, as opposed to having to go through multiple other entities to make the determination whether or not they would then elevate it to the level of court.
Yes.
I don't know if
Eric.
that's correct. Eric,
Sorry.
I thought that the state's attorney, the attorney general was the one that filed the petition.
That's right, I missed, sorry, I was looking at something else. You mean under current law? There, that's right. And maybe clarify, I'm just trying to sort of state what I think the option, what different proposals reflect. Current law, petition has to be filed by the state's attorney or the attorney general. H230, as proposed by this committee and by House Judiciary, adds family members and household members to that list. So it could be the state's attorney, the attorney general, family member, household member. Representative Donahue's amendment adds law enforcement officers to the list rather than family or household members. So under her proposal, it would be state's attorney, attorney general, law enforcement officer, file the petition. So those are
And has removed the family.
correct.
Okay. Yeah. That's helpful.
Yeah.
Just a question of clarification for Ledge Counsel, that law enforcement officers are the police, but technically the attorney general and state's attorney are a form of law enforcement, right? Like their job is to, their job is to go to court and seek people to follow the law. So aren't they? So under current law, it allows only some law enforcement apparatus or whatever to do it, but not all. And no family. And what we did is we added family. What Representative Donahue's doing is removing family and adding police officers and state's attorneys and attorney general. So it's expanding law enforcement officers that can do it, but taking out families and loved ones. Is that fair to say? Or
Yeah, I think that's right.
okay, all right. Because I just want to be clear. I said earlier like that the state's attorney was law enforcement. People didn't seem to believe me, but they actually are considered law enforcement officers. So currently, only one form of law enforcement can do it. We're seeking to add families and household members. Representative Donahue's seeking to replace families and household members with more law enforcement. The police, And so what I'm saying is I'm not okay with that. If you want to add the police, fine, but there needs to be family and loved ones, and that's not what hers do, so I don't support it.
Okay. So
Okay.
we're
Yeah, okay.
And I get clarification.
okay. So
That's for you.
Topper and then Leslie and then Alan, and then we are taking a vote.
Okay. I'm trying to put myself in the place of the family. I think it's going to be much more difficult for a family member who knows nothing about this process to file that petition. And that's why I say that if they're probably going to call the police anyway, let the police do it. They know how to do it. I think it'll be quicker.
Leslie?
Well, my confusion is why not have law enforcement officer And so that's what's confusing me. I mean, I don't want to take out family member for sure,
Okay,
but,
so we're not doing another amendment.
so that's what would it take?
We're not,
It would.
Yeah.
not doing, we are voting on this amendment as written.
But you have a right to offer that amendment after this if you wish.
No way, but, sorry, but that's not happening. But, so I just want to understand the process. I think, your points are well taken and I'm just, I mean, maybe I won't waste anyone's time. Okay, I just think that somehow if law enforcement's going to be law enforcement officers are going to be involved, but they can't file a petition as the law states now. Do we want them to be able to do that?
That is not the question on the table.
Oh, I
So
have,
if you want to do an amendment,
okay.
Okay,
Alan.
a family member, household member, did that, and I don't have it in front of me, but did that say something like boyfriend, girlfriend and all that?
Yes.
yes.
Okay, so I just see too much abuse in that
Okay.
because dating problems, a whole mess of things, so
Okay.
I cannot.
Okay. Art, and then Melanie, and then we are voting.
Yeah, it seems to me that if Rep. Morgan's First Amendment isn't in our purview, that this shouldn't be. It's just a comment. I just don't think, I think this should be a judiciary vote and we have nothing to do with it.
Okay, well, we are taking it up.
All right.
Melanie?
I would just like to say that family members care deeply and they'll do the work to get what's needed done to help their families. And so I feel like giving them more options is safer, and I like to empower our citizens. So,
Okay. Thank you. Okay, all those not in favor of this amendment, raise your hand. 7. All those in favor? 3, 0. All right, the last amendment we are doing is the amendment offered by Rep. Morgan to keep H230 in place except delay the effective date for 1 year. Any comment or discussion? Art?
I think it has real merit when you consider the fact people have to buy equipment to lock their weapons up. I mean, is that going to happen quickly? Approve it when the governor signs it. It goes into effect this July, so people have between then and July to do it. I just think another year just to allow folks to comply with the law would be a good thing.
Anyone else? Okay. All those not in favor of this amendment, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. All those in favor? All those in favor, Alan? 9 to 0. Mari, sorry, did you have a question?
Or vote.
The sunset provision on her hand hasn't kicked in yet.
I honestly don't know why my hand keeps going up. I did not
Okay.
intentionally do that, but I want to be clear too. I think the way the vote order goes on the record is actually.
There's no record, Mari. This is.
I know there's
okay.
no record, but it should be 290.
Okay,
Because
we will check in with Betsy Ann to make sure we in judiciary are doing it the same way. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I know why your hand keeps going up. Zoom has a new AI feature that when you raise your hand, a hand appears. Try it. Put your hand up. Watch what happens.
Other hand.
Maybe not. It's been doing it on mine. It's been doing it on mine.
Really smart.
All right. Well, anyway, sorry. I'll show you on mine next time. Yeah.
I'm going to keep trying that, Brian.
So I just want to say thank you again. I think we have a really good working group here. And when we have to take these hard just the votes, it's difficult. So I appreciate everyone's respect for each other and understanding of different points of views. And really enjoy working with all of you and am grateful for the way we do this process. So thank you. We are done for today. We do not have committee tomorrow. And then Tuesday, we'll put the agenda out, but I believe Tuesday afternoon, we have a joint judicial review session. So we probably won't have committee on Tuesday. So we're losing some valuable days. We'll be back at it, ready to go strong in committee on Wednesday. In between now and then, take care of yourself.